Hi guys, welcome back to Marvelman901. I'm gonna talk about the comics that I posted this week. This is week 10. So we're gonna start with Ghost Rider 2099 issue 1. This is from 1994. We are introduced to Kenshiro Cochrane, who becomes the Ghost Rider of 2099 when he learns that his body has been ruined beyond repair as he traveled into the cyberspace to escape this bad guy called Jeter, who is after him. He is given a choice to become something else to stop these viruses, as they call it, in society overall. He agrees and becomes the Ghost Rider. So yeah, that's pretty much the introduction of him. Moving on to the character of that day, which is Mystique. Most people know this character, especially from the X-Men movies. She's called Raven Darkholm, probably not her real name, maybe, but probably not. She was a leader of Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and the Freedom Force, who was basically a government-sanctioned brotherhood. She is also a foster parent of Rogue and the real parent, or at least biological mother, of Graydon Creed and Nightcrawler. So we're going to move on to X-Men issue 16. This is from 1966. It continues the previous issue where the X-Men were trapped by the Sentinels. Professor X, he couldn't really help them as they were stuck in this fortress, and he was basically, well, he's in a wheelchair. He can't really do anything with his power or anything like that either, so he decides to go back to investigate what happened to the previous Sentinel that had been incapacitated. He realizes there's this kind of gem that is a weakness to them, and he gets this gem transported over to the fortress. While this is happening, the rest of the X-Men are trying to escape captivity, and they do somehow manage to escape it, and then get trapped again. Bolivar Trask, the creator of the Sentinels, he does actually betray them, and with his help, the X-Men are able to stop the Sentinels. So we're going to move on now to X-Force 34. This is from 1994. The Moonstar of the New Mutants, otherwise known as Mirage, or otherwise, she is basically trying to explain what has happened to her ever since she became a Valkyrie in Asgard several years ago. She does explain that a lot of things have changed to all of us. We have grown, we have become something else. She is a part of the Mutant Liberation Front. She doesn't really want to explain why. Later on we will find out that it is kind of a undercover thing. However, we also see Paige Guthrie, who did save the X-Force and New Warriors from the Games Master in the previous issue. She basically tells Cable that she wants to go to Professor X in order to help, in order to learn about her powers. While this is happening, Richter learns that his cousin is in hospital after getting gravely injured. He decides he needs to go back to his home in Mexico, well, to his family, to resolve some things. Cable and Domino, they agree to come along, well, basically against Richter's better judgment or his wishes, but they come along. The problem here is, of course, that Cable has, well, not exactly him, but Stryfe, who was his evil clone, has some history with that family, as they basically killed Richter's father. Some battle breaks out, and Richter basically tells his family off, tells them that this stops now. So he leaves, they leave. This whole thing is resolved basically. So we're gonna move on to Cable 11 from 1994. This continues the Killing Field storyline, where Omega Red basically tries to look for a cure of his death spore virus thing that he has. The Acolytes previously had managed to recruit Cable in this to help them fight Omega Red. However, they had an ulterior motive, basically tricked Cable. He learns of this in the beginning of this issue, and he also realizes that they want to fight him, pretty much. He uses his extensive military training to defeat most of them, and their leader, Amelia Voigt, she tells Cable later on about how they're planning on basically screening off humanity from Avalon, or the other way around. Basically making a haven for mutants, which is a good cause in all, but eventually it didn't actually work out that way in this case. Moving on to that day's character, who is Neptune, otherwise known as Poseidon. So he is a Olympian god, one of the Olympians. He is one of those that are basically kind of low-key in the Olympian affairs. You don't really see him much overall, even though he's one of the most powerful ones. He is, of course, the god of the sea or ocean or whatever. He does have a lot to do with the Atlanteans, which makes sense as they are a very underwater species. So we're going to move on to Tales to Astonish, issue 51 from 1964. It continues the previous battle between Giant Man and the Wasp and Human Top. They are basically training to try to capture this elusive character, this spinning madness. Eventually they do work with the police to trick this character, this villain, and they do defeat him. So moving on to Morbius, issue 21. This begins the storyline of Dance of the Hunter. So basically a FBI agent has gone rogue, started to kill people, and the FBI want help from Morbius. Morbius is very reluctant, and eventually after the FBI agents basically kidnaps his undead love, he agrees. While this is happening, Vic Slaughter, who is a old villain of Morbius, he basically is after the same serial killer for somewhat unknown reasons. Morbius sees Slaughter on a rooftop, and he attacks him. Spider-Man comes swinging along and interferes, believing that Morbius is trying to kill this innocent person, and Slaughter gets away. Moving on to Hellstorm, issue 14 from 1994. This continues the previous issue where Hellstorm is basically trying to stop the arriving of Sigurim, a very powerful demon. He gets help from Jane, who is apparently someone supernaturally involved. They do manage to stop this henchman, or this Sigurim agent, but Sigurim does actually manage to get up to Earth, and there's a big fight. Hellstorm kills Sigurim in the end. While this is happening, Patsy Walker, who is the wife of Hellstorm, is trying to get her mind together, basically after having seen his true evil face, which previously made her go insane, and then she basically got back to sanity. But it's not enough, obviously, as Death Urge comes along and basically helps her die, giving her some peace. So we're moving on to that day's character called Orb. He is otherwise known as Drake Shannon. He is a Ghost Rider villain of John Blaze. His whole motive for fighting, basically, is revenge against Crash Simpson, who is the foster parent of John Blaze. Apparently Simpson caused Orb to get serious burns on his face and whole body. Yeah, so it's basically a stunt guy after Ghost Rider. We're going to move on now to Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos issue 1. This is from 1963. So it's a big introduction to these characters. This Nick Fury, Rebel Ralston, Dum Dum Dugan, Junior Juniper, Gabriel Jones, Izzy Cohen, and Dino Manelli. basically this ragtag team of elite soldiers in the Second World War who are of course against the Nazis. So going onwards with Incredible Hulk, issue 417 from 1994. This is pretty much the bachelorette and bachelor party of Rick Jones and Marlowe. So it's just basically fun and games, except of course in the beginning of the issue where the Hulk, after having faced the Maestro in Future Imperfect, he kind of gets to grip with his father's vengeance or anger in himself, and he has some serious issues. However, more to fun things, of course, with the bachelor and bachelorette party. Eventually, some things happen, of course. The women kind of gets interrupted by some guys who are trying to rob the strip joint. Of course, not the best move, as there are several superheroes there. Also, the men are watching some R-rated movies starring Marlowe. So, surprise, surprise. We're moving on to Iron Man issue 304. This is from 1994, and it's basically continuing the previous issues where the New Warriors had fought Iron Man at a kind of dam place. Thunderstrike turns up pissed off like everyone else, and he's pissed off because Eric Masterson, who is his secret identity, had basically designed the dam, which now was destroyed. So he fights the New Warriors just out of pure rage, and eventually Iron Man puts a stop to it, basically telling that, what the hell are you doing, what's wrong with you, why are you trying to resolve this by fighting? Basically grow up. He is continuing in this issue to just trying to clean up the whole Stain International mess, firing some soldiers, guards that are basically out of control, and he also realizes that more people will be contacting him, fighting him basically, because of Stain International bad business, including the Hulk, as you can see here in the end of this issue, where the Hulk comes along and Tony is wearing this super armor, basically a Hulkbuster. Moving on to that day's character, we have Psyklop. This is a character not seen too often. He was introduced in Avengers 88. An alien, apparently kind of worshipper of the dark gods, sort of voodoo cult thing. Not really much to say about him. He's not really around much. So we're gonna move on now to one from 1964, which is Journey into Mystery 100. This is a Thor story where Mr. Hyde basically kidnaps Jane Foster, and Thor has to find him, save her, and fight the villain. Basically that simple. Moving on to Darkhawk 39 from 1994. This continues the Amulet quest from the previous issue, where Darkhawk was given more power, a different suit, and he is given a task to find the rest of the amulets, the Darkhawk amulets. So he does find some trace of one. This amulet is going ballistic. Several armies, or at least one army, is trying to get hold of it, and he has to fight them and then contain the amulet and bring it back to the ship. Moving on now to New Warriors 47 from 1994. It starts the storyline of Time and Time Again, focusing on the Sphinx and the second Sphinx. The original Sphinx wants his Ka stone back from the second Sphinx, almost kills her, is out for revenge against the New Warriors, and he kidnaps them. Moving on to that day's character, we have the Rattler.
His real name is Gustav Kruger, and he is basically one of these serpent villains, part of the Serpent Society. Was introduced in Captain America 310, and he is very bionic. He has a bionic hearing aids and a bionic tail that can do a lot of different things. Moving on to another character who has a tail. This is introducing the Scorpion in The Amazing Spider-Man 20 from 1965. The Scorpion, or Mac Gargan, before it became the Scorpion, was hired by J. Jonah Jameson to find out about how Peter Parker got these great pics of Spider-Man. So he kind of tracks down Peter Parker, and tries to find some evidence. However, he can't really find any, as Peter Parker realizes that someone is after him, and J. Jonah Jameson basically sets up a way for him to be experimented on, to become more powerful, to become basically a supervillain, for $10,000, which apparently back then was a lot of money. This experiment does work. However, he becomes a bit unstable. But J. Jonah Jameson basically sends the Scorpion after Spider-Man. This is a big, nice fight. And eventually, though, the Scorpion goes a bit haywire. He basically tries to rob some people while he's after Spider-Man. And Spider-Man has to fight him again. And eventually, Scorpion goes after his former employer, J. Jonah Jameson. Spider-Man does defeat the villain in the end, of course, and we're gonna move on now to another villain, anti-hero kind of guy, Venom. This is the Maze issue 1 from 1994, and we are introduced to this mysterious character called the Maze. He is on the run from his teammates, not really sure what is going on. There really not a lot of information comes out. Only that they are very powerful. He has this powerful mace that he uses, and a lot of other stuff as well. Eventually, he just basically ends up in the car of a good friend of Venom called Beck, and Venom goes on the offensive at once, of course, and attacks the maze. We're moving on now to Marvel's issue 4 from 1994. This is a great series made by Axel Ross. Very different kind of series, as it gives a more realistic view to the whole thing. Continuing following Phil Sheldon, who is a half-retired kind of guy, journalist, who has been covering the whole superhero extravaganza that's been going on in the 60s. He does try to investigate into the death of George Stacy, Gwen Stacy's father, who died during a fight between Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus. He interviews Dr. Octopus, among other people, and he does come up with the whole Spider-Man probably didn't actually kill Stacy. He also becomes a good friend with George Stacy's daughter, Gwen Stacy, and unfortunately, though, she dies in the fight between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. Very, very nice illustrated, but very sad as well. So we're moving on to another great supervillain, who actually I have already mentioned today, Stryfe, who is basically an evil clone of Cable. Now, his whole motive during the early 90s, he was actually introduced in New Mutants 87. He's from the future. His motive is basically vengeance against his parents, who he believes abandoned him when he was a child. This is, of course, when Cable was given the techno-organic virus, and he had to move into the future by the help of the Ascani to basically save his life. He was also a leader, of course, of the Mutant Liberation Front and the Dark Riders, and very, very mean guy, very, very powerful character. Great villain. Also going on here with Marvel Comics Presents 153 from 1994. This is the Vengeance story called Dangerous Games. This is part 2. So pretty much Rebecca, a police officer on the cover, had pretty much been killed by the big game posse, and Vengeance is, well, out for vengeance. He fights them. They are very technologically advanced, of course. And out of nowhere, Annex, a small-time superhero-ish kind of guy, comes along and fights these big game posse along with Vengeance. And they actually realize that Rebecca is alive. So Annex takes her to the hospital, saving her life, and Vengeance tries to find the big game posse who escaped during the hustle. However, Annex is kidnapped by the posse, and in the end we see Sam Buchanan from the Darkhold issues arriving, not really knowing what he's going to do next. So let's see that in the next issue. Moving on now with Nightwatch. Nightwatch issue 2 from 1994. This introduces an interesting character called Flashpoint. So pretty much a kind of mysterious, I'd say pretty much a meteorite enters the atmosphere and is shot down by S.H.I.E.L.D. Bunch of shards, star shards as they call them, breaks down into the planet, and a person called Travis Lane is ordered basically to help find these. He and his troops are set in an explosion, and he kind of is changed. He is very powerful all of a sudden, radioactive, powerful, and he looking for these shards. He accidentally kind of comes in contact with Nightwatch, who attacks, of course, because this is a very odd character, very aggressive character. So they fight. Nightwatch grabs these shards that he has found and basically trying to lure Flashpoint away from the city, and then the fighting continues and will continue in the next issue. Moving on to Marvel Comics Presents yet again, issue 153 from 1994. This is the last part of this issue with Moon Knight continuing Hung Jury. This is part 2. Moon Knight pretty much tries to figure out which jury member the Praetorians had attacked. He does find out with help from his girlfriend or ally, how you want to call it. They do learn that a child had been kidnapped from the jury member by Chainsaw, the leader of the Praetorians. So to the last bit of character we have here is the Super-Skrull, otherwise known as Klurt, something like that, strange name. He was introduced in Fantastic Four 18, very early on, obviously. The Skrulls are known for being very experimental with their soldiers. He is the first of the super soldiers, Super-Skrulls, and he basically has the ability of that all the members of the Fantastic Four has. Turning into fire, and the hardened exterior power of the Thing, stretching ability of Mr. Fantastic, and the invisibility and force shields of Invisible Woman. So thank you all for listening. I hope you have enjoyed, and do subscribe. All of this is, of course, Marvel's stories, characters, and artwork. So thank you all for listening. Hope you stay safe, and hope you will listen to the next one. Okay, bye.